The better you get at pickleball, the more time you'll spend dinking during a point. Arguably, you'll hit the dink more than any other shot in pickleball. That is why it is so important that today we spend time talking about being more consistent with the dink. And if you really want to improve, I highly recommend watching to the end of this video where we will share our top 3 dinking tips for you to become more consistent. Let's go. All right, I'm Justin, and today I've got my wife Jess here helping us out. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Our videos are concise and focused on helping you on your pickleball journey. Now let's get into it. All right, so first I want to define what a dink is. So a dink is when I'm hitting the ball from the kitchen to the kitchen. So we're hitting dinks here. These are what we call dinks. Now I want to explain what the goal of the dink is. Ultimately, the goal is to keep the ball low enough so that our opponent across the net cannot attack the ball. So if we're hitting dinks like this and we pop it up too high, that is when it can be attacked. Now at the same time, my goal to try to win the point is to get my opponent to pop the ball up. We'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I do this by being aggressive with my dinks and then they can pop it up. So that's goal number 1. The second goal of the dink, and I joke about this, but I call pickleball patience ball, because if we can be more patient than our opponent, really when we're dinking, if we're just thinking, I have to outlast them, hit the ball one more time, you can win a lot of points. And really at the intermediate level, 3-0 level, 4-0 level, we can win a ton of points simply by being patient. Don't miss in the net, but just being patient and waiting for your opponent to make a mistake. All right, next, let's talk about where we want to aim our dinks. There's a lot of different areas where we want to aim, but for starters, I'm going to ask you a question. Do we want to hit our dinks typically cross court, or do we want to hit our dinks down the line? Take a quick second and answer. If you said cross court, you are correct. And the reason behind this is because there's more margin when we go cross court. The space that we have to hit cross court diagonally versus down the line is further. When we have more space, we can actually hit that dink harder. All right, the last spot we want to aim is to our opponent's weaker side. So when they're hitting a dink, try to find that weaker side. It tends to be the backhand. A lot of people struggle hitting their backhand more than their forehand just because it doesn't come as naturally. But try to pick on that weaker side when you're aiming your dink. All right, we're now getting into the technique for the dink. So I'm going to start with the grip. You probably already know this, but if not, we want typically a continental grip. So it's like you're grabbing a hammer like this, and we're hammering it down. And when we're hitting a dink, we really want that grip. We want it to be loose. Just like when you're hitting a hammer in, or you're hitting a nail with a hammer, you're not squeezing it really tight, but you're having that be loose with your grip. Now for the motion of the dink. We want to think lifting the ball, not jabbing at the ball. Whenever we're hitting the dink, we want to lift the ball over and we want our paddle to go towards our target. So wherever our target is, if it's this way, we're lifting it towards our target. This way, we're lifting the ball towards our target. Too often we see people chopping, jabbing, getting too quick. One thing I like to think of in a drill or way I show people, just setting the ball on the paddle and we're just lifting it directly over the net. All right, so we talked about lifting it, the motion of the dink, and I really want to emphasize here being compact with the motion. So we've did a video a few weeks ago on hitting the third shot drop. That's a compact swing. But with the dink, we're even more compact when we're hitting this. So I want to real quick take a couple of seconds here, a little bit, to show you a couple clips. I'm going to show you, have you pick which one you think is the correct way. So here's clip 1. Here's clip 2. Here's clip 3. and here is clip 4. Now, which one do you think was the correct swing? If you said clip number 2, then you're right. Now let me break down each one of these for why they're wrong and the one that is right. So this first one here, you'll see that the swing is way too big. We lose so much control and we have way too much power when we hit this. Oftentimes we'll find ourselves popping the ball up. Here's clip 2, the correct clip. So what you'll see here is I'm very compact with my swing here and I'm finishing out towards my target. All right, clip number 3, you'll see what I'm doing incorrectly here, and I see this a lot, is I'm chopping at the ball way too much. I'm getting way too wristy, and I've just got too much going on with my swing here. I'm gonna lose control, and I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes. Clip number 4, not too different from 3, but you'll notice I'm getting even a little more wristy. My wrist is getting involved, not necessarily chopping at it, but I'm very wristy, and this causes me, again, to lose control. So what you'll find, most of the ones where I made a mistake, I'm doing too much. And when I do too much, I lose control. And ultimately, when we want to be more consistent with our dink, we want to simplify, make it as simple as possible with a compact, easy swing towards our target. All right, I want to really quickly talk about the footwork for the dink. So right after this, we'll talk about the top 3 dinking tips. But getting back to the footwork, we want to keep our footwork very minimal. So this is, this is really counterintuitive to all other sports, especially, you come from tennis, we want to maximize our footwork, basketball, football, all these sports we want to maximize. Here, we want to typically limit our footwork to 1 to 2 steps. The reason is because we can cover, in doubles, we're only covering half the court. I can cover most of the court in just 1 step. If I take 1 step that way, 1 step this way, I'm covering most of the court. Now, you'll see here when I'm hitting some dinks, if I can get the ball over the net here, when I'm hitting some dinks, each time I'm maybe taking some small steps just to get in the right position, small steps, but it's usually 1 or 2. And also what you'll notice is when I'm doing this, I almost always keep 1 foot planted directly behind the kitchen line. Give myself a little bit of space, but by keeping 1 foot planted, I can hit and I can come back and I know right where the kitchen line is. If I'm moving both feet, it's hard for me to get right back to the kitchen line without looking. So again, I'm always keeping 1 foot, even if I get moved off a little bit. If I get moved off to the side a little bit, I'm maybe sliding 1 foot a little bit while I move the other foot further over. So we want to remember with the dink, we're keeping our footwork very minimal. All right, the part you've been waiting for, our top 3 dinking tips. So the number 1 that we're sharing is taking the ball out of the air as much as you possibly can. So this is especially for intermediate players. Whenever we can, take that ball out of the air. What we do is we take time away from our opponent. Now, we want to be careful when we do this. We don't want to be stretching too far. If the ball is really short, let that bounce. But anytime that we can, we want to take that ball out of the air. Not only does this take time away from our opponent, but also what it does is it makes our opponents think that they need to hit better dinks than they're currently hitting. So it can force them to make more mistakes. All right, top tip number 2 is paddle position. So when we're hitting the dink, when we're at the kitchen line and we're dinking, we don't want our paddle to be too low. We want to be in this ready position. The reason for this is because any time that our opponent hits a dink back to us, we've got time to bring our paddle from this position down here and hit a dink. Whereas the opposite is true. If we've got our paddle down low and they speed the ball up on us, it's tougher for us to move the paddle up and block that. So keep that paddle in a ready position right above here, not too high, but we don't want that too low. All right, top tip number 3. When we're at the kitchen line, we want to draw some imaginary lines. The first one, not very imaginary, we've got an actual line here. So get up to it. Don't stand back. Too often I see people, a foot behind the line or a few inches behind the line because they're afraid to step on it. I just shared a little bit ago. Stay on that line and just take one step. Now, the second part to that imaginary line, and this is more imaginary, is like having a fence directly behind you. So earlier in this video, we talked about having a compact swing. That applies to this, where we don't want to take our paddle back too far. We want to be out in front with that, and we also want to not step back too much. The only time we step back is if we pop the ball up, and then we can take a step back to give us more time to defend that shot. All right, finally I want to leave you with some drills, because ultimately practice is what makes improvement. So this first one, super easy. You're gonna grab a partner straight ahead, and all that we're doing is we're dinking to 50. So we're just cooperative here. We're just trying to get 50 in a row. I'm just going 1, 2, 3. You count all the way up until 50. So that's an easy drill. You're just working on consistency. Drill number 2 is where this is going to be a little bit more of a workout, but this works on your movement. So what you're going to do is you're going to have one partner. We'll have Jess here stand in the same spot, and I'm going to move so she can hit anywhere, and I'm going to get everything back to her. Not only does this work on movement of your footwork a little bit, it also works on hitting the ball, hitting your dink to different areas of the court. So it looks something like this. And you'll see here, I'm still trying to minimize my footwork, but since I'm covering the full court instead of just one half, I am moving a little bit more than what I would normally be doing. And there you have it. So be sure to take these tips out on the court and catch us in our next video. Before you go, be sure to check out Carbon Pickleball and use code PBJourney10 for 10% off any paddle or Carbon Pickleball gear.